Hi guys, I'm Sentin7 on Pokerstars, and today I'm going to be doing a short video on aggression in low-stakes Zoom 6-max games. And although I primarily make instructional videos for low to mid-stakes heads-up sit-and-goes, I think that a ton of what I teach my students there carries over really well to this game format as well. So what I'm going to be doing today is really trying to drive home the very first and, in my opinion, most important lesson that I teach low-stake heads-up guys, and that's to be relentlessly aggressive until your opponent gives you a reason to stop. Because I think when we're talking about low-stakes Zoom, we're generally going to be facing opponents who are either going to just be auto-folding until they find a top 20% hand, or even if they do try and play more aggressively, they'll most often not have the skill set necessary to combat a hyper-aggressive game plan. So I'm going to try to really push the envelope today and find out just how aggressive I can get away with being. So since a VPIP of 35% is considered very high at 6-max cash games, I'm going to try to be a hero a little bit and not just increase it by a bit, but to full out double it. So my VPIP should hover around 70-ish%. So with that said, let's just get underway and see what cool spots we can find. Starting off with pocket fours in the big blinds. Definitely going to make it easier for us to be aggressive. And with fours here against a cutoff open who's short stack, I think we can definitely just raise and get it in. I think he's going to get it in with a lot of worse hands. And we can see bet doesn't need to be too big because I assume he's just going to play a pretty fit fold in that spot. And since this falls within our range of top 70% of hands, definitely going to open. And we got to realize when we open under the gun, our perception is that we're going to have a much stronger hand than we would, obviously, if we're opening somewhere like on the cutoff or the button. So again, we can just bet now pretty happily. And rather than just calling, which I think is fine, since our position makes the ace such a strong part of our range, I think we can just re-raise and potentially get him off some kind of weaker aces or even possibly some queen that he was trying to find out where he was at. And worst comes to worst, we can easily just get it in here and just be happy to just get it in with the flush draw and straight draws. And like I said, being under the gun, our range just looks way stronger than his. And that's not a great card for us, but hopefully he was on a draw of his own. So now when we just bet half pot, hopefully that's going to be the end of it, but if he had the queen, it's unlikely he was going to fold there, but then we were going to have one bullet left for the river. And then that's going to be an important note for us to take, that he min-raised in position, called, and then folded. So likely either some kind of weak pair or another draw. And when an opponent limps on the button, we can definitely be raising. And this shouldn't hit his range very well, and with the king-high flush draw, and don't really expect him to have too many aces in his range, meaning the ace of hearts is probably not in play. Though not definitely, but seems unlikely it's going to be in play, so I'm probably just going to triple barrel here. And actually I'm just going to check and just I think we're actually good here some of the time. It's unfortunate. Perhaps should have bet there, but I felt like with some kind of weak one card flush draws and some weaker straight draws, then we might actually be good there, but actually in hindsight that's probably unlikely. And just continuing to be aggressive on the button. And if our opponent raises here, I'm just going to 3-bet because we're in position, and that's usually enough for me. And again, this kind of strategy, and we can open here. And this kind of strategy at Zoom 6-max is generally only going to be good at the lower limits, so probably up until about 50 NL. And I'm just going to come back over the top and see what happens, because why not? And that's going to be an important note. If these were regular limits, we definitely note that he kind of snapped 3-bet from the big blind against a late position steal and then snap folded to a re-raise. So as I was saying, this kind of strategy of playing with relentless aggression is generally only going to be useful. Oh, sorry, I could have 3-bet there. It's distracted by my own talking. It's going to generally only be useful at the lower limits because once you get to the higher limits to, I think, at about 100 NL, most people are using HUDs and the player pools are smaller. So people see a lot more of your hands that you play and kind of get a better feel for your style. And obviously, players are at a much higher level of thought. But up until and including 50 NL, I think we can just kind of go really aggressive with our gameplay. So once again, I'm just going to raise this. I don't really have any standard bet sizing for these limits here. I'm just kind of going by basically what my buttons come up. I have preset in Table Ninja, and basically whatever buttons comes up, that seems like good enough for me. As you can see, we're facing very little resistance so far. And since we're in position, we don't really have to raise as much as we do when we're out of position. And our hand plays really well, so we don't mind getting a call here. And I'm actually surprised by how often people are opening from the small blind, as generally people just have the auto fold on as soon as they see a weak hand in the small blind. Most people don't have the patience at these limits to wait all the way around. So when they do, especially at the higher limits, it's either an aggressive player or is just indicative of a good hand. Just bet half pot here since we're happy to continue. And a min check raise on this kind of wet board generally is not going to be very strong. So I'm going to just pump it up here, see what we can do. And if he comes back over the top, I'm just going to call. I'm just not looking to fold really ever. Anytime I have any decent equity. Oh, well, we get one. And he just flopped the stone cold nuts. So definitely that's going to be a note since that's outside I think the general population tendency when they min check raise that kind of wet board is not going to be a hand that strong. So when we see a hand that is that strong, we should definitely be taking a note of it. So a little bit of a bigger bet since it's a wet board. And since more so than a wet board, I just think that there's a ton of draws that people are going to call with and a ton of worse hands. So we're just getting max value. When he bets, I don't think there's too much value in raising. So I'm just going to flat. And definitely not folding now. If he happens to have the 8, that's good for him. And I'm actually going to make just a min raise because I don't think he's going to call much more than that if he doesn't have the 8. So I just want to kind of get max value from him, and I think if he has like a hand like 2 pair, he's probably not calling much more than that. And if he comes back over the top, that's going to be a little bit gross and likely going to have to fold. But he just goes ahead and folds, and then once again, that's going to be a good note for us to have that he donk led on turn, donk led on river, and then folded. And just continuing our relentless aggression. Once again, just for the sake of the video, we'll just keep our foot on the gas and just keep pumping. So we want to leave ourselves, I kind of outpriced myself where I can't really leave myself a decent river shove. So I'm just going to try and bet a little bit smaller here. That was bad bet sizing on my part. And if he shoves, obviously at this point we're going to have to fold. But I expect this to be some kind of draw, maybe a 10x, but some kind of draw, and that's a really good card for us to bluff on. So definitely just going to be shoving at this point. And just hope he doesn't have a set and didn't lead out with a set or anything like that, or even the ace high flush draw. Although I think he would have come back over the top with that. So take it down. Likely a 10x or some kind of draw. And versus under the gun raise, since we have a weak king, I'm just going to flat rather than 3-bet. And we didn't hit anything, so now we want to make it appear as we did. And if he has a big hand like aces or ace-king with one of the suits, and he's obviously not going to fold, but we can find out pretty easily there. And just like that, we've doubled our buy-in already. And I'm going to check here, not because I'm worried about the king, but because I think he's going to fold a ton of his hands that didn't improve on that. But I think he's going to bluff it quite a bit. And I'm going to try and trap him here and get him to bet. Okay, good thing he didn't. But I think on that king board, if he had some kind of weaker pair or straight draw or something like that, I think he's going to bluff that king a lot of the time when we check to it, because it seems as if we're scared of it. But if we bet it, I think he folds pretty much anything worse than our hand there. And because there's so many draws, I'm just going to keep betting for value. And I think here could bet and get, if we had a good king, I would definitely bet, but because our king is so weak, I think he's probably not going to call a jack at that point, but I don't really know these limits, so perhaps that's a mistake in thinking that. Yeah, he had the jack ace, so perhaps it's a mistake thinking that players aren't going to be calling second pairs there on those kinds of boards and should be value betting more thinly. Just going to continue the aggression. So I've already made a couple of mistakes here in this video, and that's going to happen. And in fact, I can't remember a single session I've played where I haven't made at least a couple of mistakes. But of course, the key is to just review your sessions after, to think through your mistakes, figure out what the best line would have been to take, and then adjust for next time. So we get squeezed by a guy who has a 2.5 times starting stack here. And again, since we're under the gun, I just want to continue with continue looking as strong as possible. And I think one way to do that is just to come right back over the top, obviously. And that should ISO out the other two players and get him to probably just flat, unless he has a real monster. And definitely going to be a good note to have there that he tried to squeeze and then just folded. And like I said, when we raise from under the gun, our range is going to look so strong that when we come back over the top of players, it's going to really put them on their heels.